Hi, everyone. This is Terrence Cheng. I am the Chancellor of the Connecticut State Colleges and Universities system. I am the host of this new podcast called Office Hours. Through candid discussions, Office Hours is going to explore the intersection of education, leadership, and economic growth. We're going to hear from state, higher education, business, and industry leaders, as well as students and faculty, and they are going to share valuable perspectives that inspire and empower listeners on their educational and professional journeys as we delve into the key issues impacting higher education across the state of Connecticut. Joining me today is State Senator Derek Slapp. He is the chair of the legislature's Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. Senator Slapp was elected to the state Senate seat in 2019 and represents the 5th State Senate District. That includes West Hartford, Farmington, Burlington, and the western portion of Bloomfield. He previously served as a state representative for the 19th House District, serving residents in West Hartford, Avon, and Bloomfield. Senator Slapp, thanks so much for coming in and joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So we overlapped a little bit in our previous careers when I was at the flagship and you were at the flagship for a little while,
Yep.
right? And so I remember we didn't get to work terribly closely, but I feel like I've known you for a long time. And so I'm really thrilled to have you join us today.
Well, thank you. No, this is great. I hear this is the first edition of Office Hours.
You are the inaugural guest for the inaugural episode of what I'm sure is going to be just a sensational podcast that takes over the world.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure,
yeah,
and if it gets canceled after the first one, it's going to be my fault.
Then I will absolutely blame you. That's for sure. But
Fair enough.
I don't think that's going to happen. So, well, Senator Slapp, thank you again. So just tell us a little bit about your background, how you kind of came through this journey to where you are now.
Yeah, well, my dad was a minister and my mother was a nurse, so I grew up in a house that really focused on public service and on helping folks. And, nobody ever said, I expect you to run for office, whatever, but they didn't really have to. It was just, that was the example that was set, is that find a way to make a difference. And so I started out after college, went into journalism, 10 years in broadcasting, and felt like that was one way to help make democracy work, was lifting up people's voices and being a reporter. I used to quote Edward R. Murrow about how a free press doesn't protect democracy, it is democracy. And so, and that sustained me for a while. And then I started feeling that I wasn't necessarily making the world a better place. I started to find some real faults in the business model of local news. And so I left and went to go work for Mayor DeStefano in New Haven, and who was, doing the hard work of making a medium-sized city work. And so, and I got a lot of meaning out of that. And so that was really the second part of my career, was in government and communications, marketing, et cetera. And so that culminated as being chief of staff for the state Senate Democrats. And I was fortunate enough to do that for Senate President at the time, Don Williams. And then when he retired, I went and started my third career, which was nonprofit administration and marketing and communications for nonprofits. That's where our paths crossed when I was at the Yukon Foundation for a few years, right. And has since went on, and now I work at the Village for Families and Children, which is a large mental health provider in the state of Connecticut, and we're a citizen legislature, as they say. So most of us have other full-time jobs. Right. And so that's my full-time job. But when I was out of, the building and not working at the Capitol and the legislative office building anymore, I found that I really missed it. So when there was an opening for, this was being a state rep in the 19th district in West Hartford, and I was approached by some people locally when there was an opening to run for that, I did. And that was in 2016, and knocked on 10,000 doors that summer and fall, and that was the beginning of my career as an elected official, and I've found to be very fulfilling, and I feel just so blessed to have the opportunity to do this.
That's amazing, and what I really appreciate about what you just said is that you made a transition because you didn't feel satisfied with the impact that you were hoping to make or you were wanting to make, right? And that's really important, because I think whether you're in the legislature, you're any kind of public servant, and I do believe in higher education, we are especially in public higher ed. We're public servants as well, and just trying to make people better, right?
Yeah, have an impact.
So tell us a little bit about your time as chair of the legislature's Higher Education and Employment Advancement Committee. How long have you been in that role? And just tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's been about 3 years, and the committee's great. It's I'm somebody who I like to work in a bipartisan fashion whenever possible. And my co-chair, Representative Greg Haddad, who represents Mansfield, he really knows his stuff. So we're able to work very collaboratively together. In higher education, I don't have to tell you this because this is, what you're devoted to, but I believe that there is no bigger economic engine in the state of Connecticut than higher education.
Absolutely.
So we may not be called, the Commerce Committee or the Labor Committee or, whatever, another committee that has to do with economic growth, but we are where it's at. Yes, I believe, not only for economic growth, but upward mobility and for, people being launched into the middle class. So I feel like we're at the center of it all, and I find it, very meaningful and an important work.
Well, I'll tell you, everything you just said resonates so deeply with me and with our leadership and folks across our system. Again, 10,000 employees, 85,000 students. And we couldn't agree with you more that, our system and frankly, higher education in general is that engine exactly. And I've always appreciated how detailed and how prepared and understanding you all are of that landscape. So we can have really meaningful conversations to try to advance those issues and causes in a bipartisan manner where we're just helping people. Right? At the end of the day, just trying to help the people. So tell us a little bit, what's on the docket these days for that higher education committee?
So the big issue that everybody's talking about higher education in the state is funding, of course, right? And what is adequate funding? What are the levels that we need to sustain our high quality of public higher education in the state? I believe that, that's our value proposition, right, in Connecticut, that we have to be the best educated, best trained state, most credentialed. Doesn't mean everybody has to have a 4-year degree or whatever, but, right, that's a crucial thing for Connecticut. So some of that is done on the Higher Education Committee. Part of that funding, of course, is through the Appropriations Committee. Right. In fact, we just passed a bill today in the Higher Education Committee that would expand our debt-free community college program to students who did not graduate from a Connecticut high school. So they're residents of the state, but take me, for instance, I grew up in Springfield, Mass. Right. So I went to Springfield Central High School. That's where I graduated. I've been in Connecticut for a long time, decades. I would not be eligible for the program. And at a time when we want to grow enrollment, and we want to make sure people can go back for retraining or to stay in the state, because we know that the vast majority of people, right, who come to community college in Connecticut stay in Connecticut. Yep. This seems like a short-sighted policy. So that's something that, the committee handled just today. That's
great. That's great to hear. And so you're referring to the PACT program, the Pledge to Advance Connecticut program, which gives residents of Connecticut the opportunity to get their educations at community colleges for free, for debt-free. That's amazing. And it's one of those things where we're so deeply appreciative that our legislature did that a few years ago, and it's been absolutely transformative for the community colleges. So, we just know that a lot of work goes into just making those things happen. But you have a lot of experience in higher education, so it's quite appropriate for you to be the leader of that committee. You've served as a lecturer in political science at this university called Yale, I heard of.
Right, I think it's in New Haven.
Yeah, it might be in New Haven somewhere. Yep. You've also served at Quinnipiac, Sacred Heart, at our own Central Connecticut State, Southern Connecticut State, and even at Eastern. We just got to get you to Western. You'll have that's all 4 universities.
That's right.
But so tell us about that. Tell us about wanting to be in the classroom and how that works for you.
Yeah. So when I left the media, I had a lot to process, and I thought I also had a lot to contribute in terms of, helping to educate the next generation about the great things about the media, but also some of the challenges and how we can make it better. So I created a class essentially and pitched it to the dean of the political science department at Yale, and was accepted. And so for about 8 years or so, I was a lecturer there in the political science department. I also taught television news writing and some other classes at the schools that you mentioned, and that was a lot of fun as well. And so be able to understand what was on the student's mind and hopefully get some of them to go into journalism. That was part of the goal as well. But to go in also kind of thinking about how journalism shapes the world around us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really valuable that people with experience like yours get into the classroom and again, transfer that knowledge and experience to others who are going to come behind us. So that's really neat. So I'll be honest, I miss teaching, right? Being a full-time administrator, I came up through the faculty ranks. So tell me a little bit about some of the things that you love the most about being in front of a classroom, being with a group of students.
Well, I loved being able to listen to students' own experience. And, I think that I approached it with a good deal of intellectual curiosity. And that's how I try to legislate as well. So listening to students' perspective, who, students are from other countries, maybe other parts of this country, right? And so, listening to their take and having a back and forth with them. The most gratifying thing, I think, is when they have this aha moment and they take something that we've been discussing in class and then they apply it to something else that they see coming up,
right?
And that's really meaningful.
Yeah. You mentioned that aha moment, right? Are there other moments you can think of or other times where the value of what you've engaged with these students in that classroom has crystallized?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. It is a deeper, more kind of meaningful acknowledgement when you have students who, and you probably have felt this too, who, well after your class is over and they reach back out to you and they say, you know what, like what you contributed was really impactful, and I'm going to go into journalism, or hey, I'm going to graduate school to study this, and would you be a reference for me?
Yes.
And so that kind of thing, and even after they've graduated and they've gone on and they've followed up, that's pretty much
and
the coolest thing.
You made somebody's life better because they remembered you,
right?
And they still want to talk to you and all those things. So I mean, it's kind of in the same trajectory here. So have you felt any kind of change in yourself and your journey through in the teaching experience or through students? Like, because you're the teacher, you're supposed to be the one kind of guiding the process of knowledge creation and discovery. But have you ever reflected on, wow, this experience has really kind of shaped me as well?
100%. And I give you a good example. So I was teaching a similar class at the same time at Yale, and I believe it was Central. And both of the student groups were kind of inspiring and impressive, maybe just in different ways. I was very impressed with some of the obstacles that the students at the time in my class at Central had to overcome just to get to class.
Right.
And so, they were, that impressed me. And I was like, wow, like you are hungry for higher education.
Yes.
And I remember there was one day, there was a snowstorm and this young woman had to take, like 3 different buses to get to class, right?
Right.
And I was blown away.
Yeah.
They were there, ready to learn. Many of them, I mean, I don't have to tell you, you this. You're an expert in this, but were paying for it themselves.
Right.
And so that's not to diminish the Yale students at all. They were both impressive, sometimes in different ways.
Yeah.
But it was an eye-opening experience for me.
You've clearly been engaged in higher education at various levels. I would argue that things have changed a lot, right? In a lot of different ways. I'd be curious to get your take if you feel like you've seen higher education change, whether it's in Connecticut or even on a national scale, or maybe even more kind of interpersonal ways.
There are some trends in higher education that concern me. One is the transactional nature of that it seems to be growing kind of in higher ed. Is like higher ed is all about just the means of getting a job, right? And not about changing the way that we think. and helping us become critical thinkers.
Right.
And so, it's that stress of STEM versus STEAM, right?
Sure.
And so,
Sure.
I mean, I say this as, I'm a father of 3, and the younger one he's 11, so we don't know what he's doing. But the older 2 are both. One of them is studying to be a professional cellist, and the other is going into some probably mix of viola performance and political science.
Wow.
So it's close to home for me too. Like
Sure.
I do think that the arts are important. The liberal arts are super important.
Absolutely.
Not everybody can go into STEM, and so that is something that I am concerned about.
So 96% of our students within the CSCU system are, they're Connecticut residents, right? And they're going to stay and live and work in Connecticut. And I always say this, that, we have wonderful educational opportunities, right? Whether it's the flagship or the private institutions. But I really do think that our community colleges and our universities kind of play a special place across the whole state. So I'd be curious to try and get some of your thoughts, right? And it doesn't have to all be positive too. Like, where do you think that our system is really doing great? Where would you like to see us, intensify our efforts a little more?
Yeah, well, I agree with you in terms of, keeping the students that we have. There's that marketing term, the best customers are the ones you already have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people who are here in Connecticut, and as we talked about before, making sure that we really have top-notch public higher education here. So I think we've done a good job. Your administration, and I think working hand in hand with the legislature to create more on-ramps to higher education, the auto admit program, to just getting rid of barriers.
Yes.
I know how hard it is for me, and I'm chair of the higher education committee, getting through the FAFSA and just doing, all the paperwork and I have a lot of privilege, right? And so there's a lot of people who, are working a lot of different jobs and have so many obstacles in their life. Yeah. And so making it as easy as possible, I think, to get in. And this is an area where I think we could do more, but to help with retention, right? And to, and I'd love, your thoughts on that as well, because I know that you're committed to that, of helping so it's not, a semester here or there and then falling off, because we want to make sure that it's a good investment, not only for the people who are paying for it, themselves, of course, with time, money, but also for the state of Connecticut, because now we're pumping money in, not only, for the infrastructure and paying obviously for public higher education, but with the expansion in terms of, debt-free, at least at the community colleges.
Yeah, we have to continue to evolve. And I've said this publicly, privately, in testimony. 21st century students have 21st century needs. 21st century society has different needs than it had 20 years ago or 40 years ago. And it's part of our job as a public entity to serve those needs. And that means we have to continue to push and change and get better. So you mentioned your children before, right? You said one is in college already?
One is in college, yep.
And so, so what was that like from that side of the table, so to speak, that whole process of looking at what's out there and kind of reconciling all the details?
In this case, our oldest, Maggie, out of high school, and she's following her dream right now. She went to a public high school in West Hartford, and her dream is to, be playing for the New York Phil or the Boston Symphony Orchestra, and to be a cellist. So she's at the Eastman School of Music up in Rochester, and she's a sophomore, and we're just bursting with pride that she's doing that, and she works so hard. These string musicians, 4 or 5 hours a day of practicing on top of all the homework. Right. So that's where she is. And then we have a senior in high school right now, and we are waiting to find out. We're in the waiting game like so many other parents, and we've gone through the FAFSA.
So we're getting towards the end here. I figured I'd ask you a few lightning rounders.
Yeah, let's do it.
And anything that you're like, oh, this will be problematic for me in my professional and personal life, you can just pass, of course.
Okay.
So we'll start with the first is so your favorite New Haven pizza?
I'm gonna go with Bar.
Okay.
I know people thought, they're going to go Pepe's or Sally's, but Bar has those strips. If you've ever been to Bar. So the others are great, but Bar is terrific.
Excellent. Yankees or Red Sox?
100% Yankees.
Okay. That might get you in some trouble here and there. Favorite hobby?
Ooh, favorite hobby.
Do you have time for hobbies?
I do. I love playing basketball with my son, who's
Nice.
11. So, makes me feel like I still got it. Yeah, I can still go. I'm a lefty, but I can go either left or right.
You're better than me. I hurt myself watching basketball. So, favorite musical instrument?
So here is where I have to be diplomatic because I have 3, actually 4, counting my wife, musicians in the house. So my daughter's cellist, and then I got a violist and a violinist. So I got to say those 3. My wife's a flutist. Flute is okay. I'll tell you my least favorite.
Okay, yeah. Let's do
right.
that.
So I like all those. My least favorite is the piccolo. So my wife does piccolo scales, and it's like a dog whistle. Right? I mean, it's so high pitch, and most flutists
Does
also
she
play
know
the
this?
piccolo.
Because she's going to hear this.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
No, she
all right,
knows. Usually, if it's the summer, I'll get out of the house and just go out to the back or something. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Okay.
Food, football, family. Nothing better.
Enough said. What was the first bill you passed?
Yeah, so the first bill I passed was creating the MDC, Independent Consumer Advocate. So for folks who don't know what the MDC is, it's essentially like the water authority that provides water and sewer for Greater Hartford. So 8 towns and another 3 member towns, about 500,000 people in Greater Hartford. And so I drafted this bill and got it through the Senate and the House. We passed it unanimously, and it's helped consumers save hundreds of thousands of dollars since we passed it into law in 2017, and really helped give them a voice.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And talk about long-term impact, right? And like you started, some of your thoughts was, am I making people better? Am I making people's lives better, right? And what you just said, your first bill, like you've seen the impact of that. That's really great.
Can I tell you about the second one real quick?
Yeah, sure.
The second one is probably my favorite.
Okay.
And that is, we were one of the first states in the country to ban the salary history question. So employers cannot ask a job applicant, how much do you currently make?
Oh my gosh.
Your job.
Yeah.
So we really help close the gender wage gap, which, that salary history question disproportionately impacts women,
right?
Single women, women of color,
right?
More. But, it prevents everybody from getting lowballed.
Right.
Right. And so that took a couple years to get passed.
Yes.
But we were one of the national leaders since then. About 20 states have passed that bill. And so every single day in Connecticut, when people are applying for jobs, that law helps them.
That does. And I'm old enough to remember filling out job applications and having it say where did you work and what was your salary. So I do remember that. So
there's some states where they actually can ask for your W-2s.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, can you imagine? And you're trying to negotiate a salary?
No, I'm glad I don't live in those states.
Right.
I'll just say that right now. Well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure, and I genuinely mean this. I've learned a lot, not just about you, but again, just about the impact that the legislative work has, right? Just when a bill passes, what does it do? How does it do it? And how long does it have an impact? And so thank you. And again, all of your colleagues too. You do an incredible amount of work. I say this a lot. It's unseen, it's unheard, but it is certainly not unfelt. So we really deeply appreciate you.
Well, thank you. And thanks for your team and your leadership. And I feel like we're all in this together, and we want to help Connecticut, and we want to help its students and make it a great place to go to school and to raise a family. So thanks again for everything that you do.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for tuning into Office Hours. I'm Terrence Cheng, the Chancellor of the CSCU system here in Connecticut. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and listen in to future episodes, because we're going to discuss why higher education should be a part of Connecticut's growth strategy with state and business leaders.